Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. Hello to the, 36 participants here, and also hi to the other Russian room. This is the first time I'm giving a presentation when there's like a whole other separate room that is following in another language. So I will try to talk slowly so that everybody has time to catch up. And if you have any questions, feel free to write them in the chat as I'm presenting. If you can wait until the end with the question, that's great. But if you have something burning you want to ask, feel free to jump in. I will be checking the chat on the right. So, hi. Knowledge plus nuance, why we need to care about tech. For those who don't know me, my name is Tin Geber, originally from Croatia, currently in The Hague, in the Netherlands, which, I must clarify, since I'm from the Balkans, I'm not here for the usual reasons people come here from the Balkans. I'm here because I work as a social innovation specialist at HIVOS, which is a Dutch-based international development organization. I am also a computational artist. The thing you see on the right is one of my works. And if you want to read more about that stuff, on the bottom you see my Twitter account and my personal website, thin.fyi. I've been working in the field of, let's say, technology for the social good for the better part of this decade. Before joining HIVOS, I was working with the Engine Room, which is a small NGO, international NGO that is focused specifically on helping activists and advocates learn or find best ways to integrate technology into their work. So I have spent a bunch of time, kind of figuring out, strategizing best ways to use technology in many different cases, mostly around transparency and accountability, but also with some time spent within the environmental issues and other like human rights issues. And I've worked kind of globally, not a lot in Southeast Asia, only Indonesia, mostly in the Balkans, Eastern Europe, Southern Africa, and Latin America. So we are here to talk about why tech is important and why we should care. So I wanted to start this off with a cautionary tale. This happened, I think, more or less a month ago. The picture got squished, but I think it's still visible. The World Food Program, which is the UN agency that deals with humanitarian aid, specifically food and other types of food, aid relief to the most endangered communities around the world, has signed a big contract, a partnership contract with Palantir. It is a $45 million dollar partnership with the idea of Palantir, the data company, providing services to mine data on who the World Food Program is supporting. In order to increase efficiency, they have an idea that this would mean for them to basically learn better how and where to deliver food and how to be faster with their logistics. With some interesting concepts, like they have this idea where they will be able to, like a bank, flag unusual activity, pick up anomalies, and so on. They're working with 92 million aid recipients, and most of those aid recipients are in the most in the most endangered places in the world. Some additional goals there are having a data lake where all the data pours into one lake, but at the same time, the World Food Program assures that there is no data sharing, which is interesting because it's impossible to have both. So why is this important? It's important because of who Palantir is. Palantir is a US-based organization. I'm guessing some of you already know or have heard about Palantir because it's been in the news a lot. They are a US-based data mining firm that produces basically surveillance instruments and platforms They were seed funded by the CIA, and they have worked with police, the GCHQ, the NSA, all the different spy agencies of the Western world. And they have had a huge history of very bad practices, from the fact that they provide all the software and machinery for the deportation machine in the current administration in the U.S. Apparently, they also discriminate against specifically Asian engineers. They have been in contact and working with Cambridge Analytica, which is another organization that you probably know that has been siphoning data out of Facebook for extreme right groups. So it's a weird match. It's a very interesting match that really doesn't fit. So as soon as this news came out, there was a massive uproar on the socials. I collected some of the experts that were discussing this at the time. There's Sean McDonald, who funded Frontline SMS, who basically says, the whole fact of not being able to the whole fact that data is protected from Palantir is basically A, wrong, and B, fundamentally misunderstands how data works. Thane Greenwood from Harvard Humanitarian Initiative, basically, full spectrum of badness at this announcement. Zara Rahman from the Engine Room, fundamentally saying horribly irresponsible, potentially incredibly harmful, and so on. So why it is important? Fundamentally, we have two opposite business models in this case. Thank you, Irina. I will speak slower. On one hand, we know we have the World Food Program that, it serves 92 million people and some of the most vulnerable communities around the world. They already have a pretty bad track record of how they manage their data. 3 years ago, there was an audit on their biggest data management platform and the audit basically said, I read it entirely because it's a very fun read. The audit says, you have great intentions, but your implementation is horrible. There is no tracking of the data. There is no training or capacity building, and we just cannot, put or vouch for or guarantee safety and privacy of the people you are supporting. And they work in crisis contexts, including war. On the other hand, we have Palantir, whose main value proposition is to combine large data sets for improved analysis. That is their business. Their interest is in collecting as many data as they can and munch them together so that their machine learning systems and their AI can provide, better predictions. That is their whole point. And their main links are to military, to CIA, to organizations like Cambridge Analytica, and so on. So basically, the biggest risk here is that the World Food Program is providing this massive treasure trove of data to an organization that has a very bad track record, that is by design going to use that data for their own needs and probably also share it with their other partners. So why this cautionary tale? It is clear to us, we are all here because we all know that data and technology hold enormous potential. But at the same time, we also know that, technology is inevitable. In anything that you do, sooner or later, there will be more technology in it, never less. Anything that you do will have more technology as we move on. At the same time, we are clueless. And I say we, I should probably, I could specify every single word of this sentence, but by we, I mean the social goods sector. And I mean this on average. Many people are not clueless. Many people do know what they're doing, but on average, we are pretty much clueless. Clueless in the sense that we just don't even know what we don't know. Not knowing what we don't know makes it possible that somebody from the World Food Program thinks that partnering with Palantir is a good idea. And that happens because if we don't have a clue, the clue will be provided for us. Somebody will swoop in and in the cautionary tale, World Food Program and Palantir organized their partnership, I think 2 years ago at Davos. Davos, the big World Economic Forum meeting of all the richest people in the world, where, Palantir sellers sold the idea to some World Food Program executive who just didn't know enough about technology to be able to ask the right questions. He only or she only saw, it was probably a white man, let's be honest, probably just saw the efficiency promise, the tip of the iceberg of the promise of, improved efficiency, reduced costs, and so on. And there was nobody knowledgeable enough at the time to say, well, no, there are many other questions we should be asking, because nobody even at the moment didn't even know which questions they should be asking. That is why we need to be able to trust our allies to give us the clues. In terms of technology, when I say that, I mean no organization, and even this course, as was said at the beginning, this is not a course meant to create technological experts. Becoming a technological expert, it's a career. It requires going back to school for 4 years. But we also need to be able to trust our technological allies to provide us with the clues. We need to know and be able to choose the right partners, from the most harmless thing, like choosing the right tech service provider to develop, the institutional website, all the way up to more complicated things like finding the right, data mining partner to do investigative journalism into, massive trove of data, like the OCCRP is doing right now, the anti-corruption investigation group. But we need to be able to trust allies to give us those clues. The establishing trust requires knowledge and nuance. Establishing trust with a technical service provider, with a partner in technology, requires us to be knowledgeable enough to know which questions we can ask and which questions we can't ask, and nuanced enough in our understanding of technology, nuanced enough to be able to understand their answers and understand also what the limits are of those answers. And so this is the basis of also why this course is important. So a couple of examples of knowledge and nuance, of how different organizations managed to kind of combine their knowledge with technological knowledge to be able to find allies that they can trust. These are all examples that come from personal experience. I was part of the groups that were working on these examples. So the first one comes from Croatia. The Croatian watchdog organization GONG, election monitoring organization GONG, created a platform called Mosaic of Influence. Mosaic of Influence is an online tool that shows all the information they can find on politically exposed persons, the famous PEPs, and connects them all together so that you can get an overview of where, for example, the screenshot we are seeing is our current prime minister in Croatia, which companies he owns, which real estate he owns, who are other people that are connected to him, which other people he is conducting business with. So that we can create the mosaic of influence, understanding who owns what and also who owns who. So the cool thing about this project is that GONG was not a tech organization at all 2 years ago. They never did a project that involved technology. They just knew that they wanted to do this. Therefore, what happened is it was a 2-year project where they partnered up with tech expertise and brought it in the organization and collaborated with Code for Croatia, with specific tech providers, and created a very complex kind of blended group that worked to develop this program, because they understood that, first and foremost, they didn't know what they don't know, so they had to define good allies. So the first step for them was finding a good product owner. For those who don't know, a product owner is a type of role that you will learn all about in your next courses. But suffice to say, a product owner is different than a project manager or a project lead. It is more of a person who takes ownership ownership of a project and protects it from others in very basic terms. The search for this product owner was crucial, and this is where I helped to define the right person who already knew enough about both worlds, domain knowledge and tech expertise, to be able to connect Gong, who didn't have that knowledge, with the right trusted partners. The website is online and it's working really well. And now they are having plans on expanding the concept and the platform across the Balkans and across the EU. But the most interesting thing is that it actually, doing this project, actually enacted organizational change within Gong. And Gong found themselves just being more capable of doing other things because they learned what a product owner does. They incorporated, processes like using Trello boards and different activity management tools, online communication tools like Slack, online, activity tracking tools like Trello, and so on. Example number one. Example number two. Can you guys still hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Excellent. It's good to check every once in a while. Example number two comes from Hungary, and you also might be familiar with it. K-Monitor is a fairly visible and successful transparency and accountability organization from Hungary. It's been working for a long time, but there is this one project that I wanted to talk about. It's called, let's see, Vagyoni Latkozatok Hajnala, which the project is digitizing asset declarations of Hungarian MPs, members of parliament. They did it every year as soon as the government would publish those asset declarations. Basically, the government publishes them in PDFs, and they're written by hand, and they're impossible to actually digitize and measure and analyze and count. So every year, K-Monitor would collect a bunch of people, and they would work for, a week or even more than a week to, painstakingly digitize all this information. So 2 years ago, instead, what we did, where I helped them with the engine room at the time, is we had a week-long sprint to create a platform specifically for this digitization that basically dropped the time that it took them to digitize all the information down to 24 hours. They managed to have everything digitized 24 hours after, the asset declarations were published, which is awesome and great. I think the most important thing here that K-Monitor gave us as feedback is that week they spent in close contact with UX designers, graphic designers, back-end, front-end developers, product owners, Scrum Masters, actually helped them organizationally more than just this project, because their staff learned how to work with technologists. They learned what they can ask, what they can't ask, and how to ask things, and how to understand what they are being answered. That was example number two. Example number three comes from Ukraine, and shout out to all the Ukrainians on this channel and in the other channel right now. I didn't work directly on this project, but I did a consultancy research last year about this project's impacts. Network 100% Life is a network of group of volunteers across Ukraine that work with people living with HIV and TB. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to understand how they can use the new contracting system called Prozoro in order to improve the quality of services that hospitals were giving to their patients. And they did amazing stuff, honestly. Now I'm talking about Dozoro here instead of Prozoro. Dozoro is the kind of like the watchdog monitoring system of Prozoro. But what they did is that first and foremost, they recognized the early potential of what Prozoro could become, and they started funding the development of Prozoro from the beginning. So they worked with Transparency International and other organizations from the seed stages in which there was still no system at all, but they understood that it could be really useful for them. Once the system was online, what they did, they blended their classic work, the campaigning, with actual gaining of tech expertise. In this specific case, they taught themselves and their volunteers how to use the public procurement system so that then they can go to the hospitals and teach the hospital representatives how to use it. So they basically turned themselves into capacity builders so that they can convince and help hospitals to get on the platform, because the platform is simply more just and more correct in assigning appropriate services and basically saving money. Okay, Irina, sorry about that. Let me drink some coffee. Okay, I will try to take it down 3 gears. And so the strength of this example is, again, the knowledge and nuance that they created for themselves by teaching themselves and working with the Prozora team to be able to then kind of use their knowledge to advocate for better use of funds directly in the hospitals. Okay, example number 3 done. Now we go into the last part, why this course matters. So first of all, civic tech is dying. And it's a good thing. And by that, I mean that the civic tech as, how can I call this, as its own sector is becoming to lose relevance, because civic tech is becoming more and more connected with what all the civil society is doing already. It is a little bit like, I don't know, imagine if we were in the 80s and fax machines came along, and then people would be saying, what is the impact of the fax technologies on the development? And then at some point, fax just became a thing that everybody used and just became integrated into the processes. And that is what's happening right now with civic technology, and it's amazing. More and more organizations are simply integrating technology into their work. And there is less and less disconnect between what is a technological approach and what is a non-technological approach. There's only one approach, and technology is part of it. That means that what's happening is, so there's less and less separation, and there is more and more general knowledge in civil society about, what tech can and cannot do. And on the other hand, there is more and more specialization. So, we always need experts, and those experts are becoming more focused on delivering their expertise and less focused on trying to cover everything that a civil society organization would want to do. A good example is the Code for All network, that is more and more understanding that their main, Code for All network is a global group of coders for the social good, and they are present in almost all the countries. There's Code for Poland, Code for Romania, Code for Ukraine, and so on. And they, as a group, are realizing that the biggest value that they can provide is being a specialized group on-demand support for civil society organizations. And as an example, last year I did this research for HIVOS that is called the Bridging the Gap Between Anti-Corruption Advocacy and Technology, where we interviewed dozens of success cases of organizations who really use technology well. And at the end of the day, what came out is a good organization has usually these 3 qualities. The first one is that everyone is a spreadsheet master, which means everyone in the organization knows enough of the basics of how to use data to be able to be smart about it. And usually they don't have any more than 1 or 2, what we are calling deep divers, so technical experts within the organization. Sometimes none, sometimes they just have an external partner. But number three is the most important one. There is general knowledge about what other technologies can and can't achieve, which is very close to what we are talking about. So digital competencies are basically gaining knowledge and gaining nuance. So the more digital competencies I gain, the more knowledgeable and the more nuanced I become and my organization becomes. Question from Russian room. Could you please give an example of a civic tech? That's a good one. That's a good one and a massively broad one. By civic technology, I think the running definition a couple of years ago was any kind of technological implementation that is particularly useful or improves the life of citizens in a city, in an urban area. So by some definitions, Uber is a civic tech project. Not by my definition, but it can be understood that way. And within the civic tech umbrella, usually everything that was, tech-based and somehow worked for the social good was put in. Examples are, online parliamentary tracking, e-parliament websites. Examples are open data portals. Examples are all the work that my society is doing with creating, election monitoring platforms and so on. I hope that clears up a little bit. So it's a massively broad hat. That's why I'm happy that it's becoming more integrated and less of a ephemeral thing. The citizen and community-centered IT products. Yeah, sure, works. I will keep going, and if the Russian room wants to go further, just let me know in the comments. So, increasing digital competencies increases our knowledge of what is possible, what is not possible, and our nuance, refines our understanding of technology. And knowledge and nuance together brings about technical intuition. The technical intuition, David, good point. Knowledge plus skills. In my mind, I combine skills within knowledge of products and knowledge to use the products. And I decouple nuance in terms of complexified thinking about terms. But yeah, you are absolutely correct. And so knowledge and nuance together brings us to, the growth of what is being called technical intuition. And technical intuition is, I like to call it ambient knowledge because it sounds cooler. But in short, gaining technical intuition means gaining this, refining the gut feeling of understanding what technology does and doesn't do. That comes through working with technology, and it comes through expanding one's knowledge of what tech can be. A very good example is when I was a kid. My dad is a lawyer, and when I was a kid, once I asked him, what exactly, in order to be a lawyer, what exactly did he learn in school? Like, what did they teach him so that he can now be a lawyer? And he said, the best thing that I learned, for me, the most useful thing is that once somebody gives me a problem, I know which book to pick up from the shelf in order to read the problem. And that is, for me, a very good example of what technical intuition means. I don't have to know the solution or be able to code the solution, but I know who to ask, and I know I can understand on an intuitive level whether that is possible or impossible, how much it would cost in terms of time and money, and whether it's worthwhile. And that brings us to the conclusion of my apparently very fast talk. I apologize for that. This is a reading list of all the stuff that I presented in this presentation, and I will also share in the chat a link to the online version of this presentation so that you can actually click on those links that you see there. And thanks for listening. So, any other questions?